I looked at Eliot's vest and realized I dressed like a poet from the 1950s. It was a mistake. It's such a happiness to get to honor you today, Joyce.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I met Joyce, so I came back to Berkeley from teaching in upstate New York in 1971. 1972, I sent off a book and got it published in 1973. The literary scene in the Bay Area was the basement of City Lights, an institution because Lawrence Ferlinghetti stayed with it, got sued by the district attorney, went through all kinds of stuff. And the Poetry Center at San Francisco State. And I think that was it. Stanford had a creative writing program, but it didn't really belong to the Bay Area energy then. One of the people that I met around the time that I met Joyce was Alan Soldovsky, who was involved with the early readings at Cody's, and he went and did the same in San Jose, so that San Jose became part of, was Cody's South. And, but mostly, what Brenda was saying, and you'll get tired of hearing, she just did it. How you do things, you just do. You go in and you do it, and you do it for 50 years, and you make an institution. So you've given us the artistic life of this place, its home, in an amazing way. I think it was 76, maybe 75. I had published a book. You had not. The young Joyce and Susan Lurie, her friend, would come to all the readings. We would go after and talk about them. It wasn't flirting, it was poetry. Right. She was really cute in 1950. And somewhere in that period, you're going to talk about this, so I don't need to, but there was a broadside or a calendar that had gotten started in a sketchy way. And Joyce moved in, took it over, transformed it into Poetry Flash. At one point, I remember hearing that Poetry Flash had a subscription of 22,000 people.
Yes, we were the largest literary magazine
it was,
circulation in the country.
Well, you're going to tell this story. So what came out of that also was, especially through you and Mark Baldrich, was starting at the annual environmental poetry reading. I'm told that towns, cities all over the country have modeled themselves on that. So anyway, it's quite amazing what you did. And I don't know how to say thank you for it. I did get a chance to say a kind of thank you because when we put together the Addison Street anthology, as pieces of stainless steel, not stainless steel, the other kind of steel, embedded in the sidewalk with lettering made out of the kind of enamel that you make dentures out of. Put the history of Berkeley poetry in the street. And the question was where to put Joyce and Richie. And it wanted to be a place where there'd be a lot of action. And so we put it right in front of Freight and Salvage. And so then I went to Joyce's poems and thought, what's the right poem for in front of Freight and Salvage that is about poetry and gets her combination of qualities. And so here is Piano Man. Friday night, beautiful jazz piano at Picante's. 2 people in the room, 3 grubby skateboarders and several ticket holders waiting for their food in the next. The music simple, yet impossibly lovely, impossibly complicated, pours out of the shiny black spinet. The piano player notices me listening. He can hear me listening. He turns his head slightly to look. I look away to avoid eye contact because the music is impossibly intimate. How can I tell him that it's okay that no one but me hears? That I will walk out and down 6th Street and we will be alone, but that he must not stop playing. That he is not alone as long as he sounds. That he means as long as he sounds. That he cannot stop playing. He must not. Why did she hang on to Poetry Flash for 50 years? Alongside Richie. Since he's not here, when we did this book, put the poems in, I had to write a little biography of each person. So I'm going to read the biography of Richie. What this doesn't include is the fact that Richie at any moment during baseball season knew exactly what the score was. Richard Silberg was born in Brooklyn in 1940 and hitchhiked across the country from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Berkeley in 1966, a trip that resulted in his first published poems. He returned to Berkeley in 1969 and has lived in California ever since. In 1978, she started in 1975 or 76?
Poetry Flash?
Yeah.
72.
72. So here's Richie moving in on the action. And he's lived in California ever since. In 1978, he began working on Poetry Flash, joining Steve Abbott and Joyce Jenkins, who were then producing the paper. He became associate editor several years later and has curated with Joyce Poetry Flash at Cody's, the main poetry reading series in the city for 20 years, the time that this was written. Silberg has introduced readings, reviewed poetry for the Flash, and taught a poetry workshop through UC Extension that drew students from all over the Bay Area. His books of poetry include Translucent Gears, The Fields, Totem Pole, and Doubleness, a collection of the Poetry Flash essays, Reading the Sphere and Geography of Contemporary Poetry, was published in 2002. So that's that external story. And the story for us is Richie always looked to me like a kind of monk of poetry. That was what he lived by himself. He read everything. He could say something articulate and completely accurate about everything he read. And his intelligence was completely generous, most supple, mercurial brain I'd ever watched in action. So I had to pick one poem for him, and I was thinking again, next to Piano Man, a poem about the muse, and there's a poem, his muse was the audience, that he was so generous to, and this is a poem called The Audience. Redemption, because they loved me. Or loved me in my words. Intelligent faces, soulful, pricked for the poetry. And that night, a woman came in a dream. A woman came in a dream, Indian or black, aging, alone. The phrase, ghost in her eyes. And in quotations, I'm a perfect case for attention, she said. So I was listening to her words, pained, dry, fretful, driven, writing them down for the poetry that disappears. She seemed flattered, not realizing the flat of the language, its tundra. I was flattered too, not realizing her own need simply to speak. Loaves of bread, she said. The next morning, I saw loaves were love, risen, their faces amazed that we know someone in dream, wandering in tundra, words redeemed.
Joyce, are you ready? Are you ready for your close-up?
Probably not.
Do you want some help?
Yeah, just probably not ready. I'm gonna take this just to put these on.
Yep.
Go ahead.
We're gonna torture you with love.
I have nothing to say, I'm just
Okay.
helping you get there.
Lovely. I'm just gonna use this as a shelf. Gosh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love you all so much. I love you guys, and thank you, everyone. There are people here that drove from LA and San Jose and Healdsburg and Sacramento and San Carlos and Northbrae, and thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, well, I better start with my little history.
How many volumes?
I should keep a this is just a thumbnail history. I mean, it's ridiculous, the history. You could go on volumes, as Lee said, but just to start, this is just the San Francisco International Poetry Festival got me into Poetry Flash. I did two, 1978 and 1980. Kenneth Rexroth read at the 1980. He'd been ill and his reading had been downplayed because I felt he might not make it. He called me at 7 a.m. to howl, "San Francisco? I am San Francisco." Then escaped from the hospital to get here from Santa Barbara. Poets came to that festival from all over the world. Ondaatje from Canada, when he was only writing poetry. Kazuko Shiraishi from Tokyo. Isaac Bashevis Singer, who was a closet poet, it turns out. And I came to San Francisco crazy for poetry. I went to every reading I could, ended up writing one of the first grants to the California Arts Council, and got 20,000 to fly poets in from all over the world. The idea was Ferlinghetti's. He wanted to make a Carnegie Hall for poets in San Francisco. That great city that has always had a special relationship to poetry, like painting is to New York. I wrote poems about being the only woman in North Beach, carried my office around in a basket, co-directed the 78 festival, directed the 1980. And Poetry Flash was a sponsor of all this. Poetry Flash was the primary organizing force. I came to, just after the 78 festival, featuring Ferlinghetti, Corso, Ann Waldman, Entezaki Shange, Erica Jong, Audre Lorde, Michael McClure, William Burroughs, Tom Gunn. You get the idea. There was a community meeting by Poetry Flash founder John Ford. He owed $75 to the printer and didn't think he should have to pay. He handed over the flash to San Francisco poet and writer Steve Abbott. The mom and pop printer, Hoover Printing in Oakland, agreed to be publisher for the debt. You may know Steve Abbott from the memoir Fairyland that his daughter Alicia published in 2014 and that a recent Hollywood film is based on. Steve's first act was to knock on my door, came directly from the community meeting to my front door. I had just left the community meeting and just got home. He was pounding on the door saying, help me, Joyce, help me. I said, sure. Poet-actor Richard Silberg was known for his reviews at the failing East Bay Review. We asked him to join us 6 months later. The flash was then an 11 by 17 folded bookstock, hand-stuffed and collated. The first photo ever run in the flash was a car door spray painted, "Poetry is the heart at liberty." Steve was editor and I was associate editor. I did all the production, all the proofreading, editing. Steve was the king of typos. He once wrote an article with 32 typos in it. And I just said, you're not doing this anymore. Steve became co-editor in October 1979, then contributing editor as he concentrated more attention on his publisher, on his own writing, organizing readings, and on his literary mag, Soup. I became Poetry Flash publisher with Steve's support in July 1980. Richard Hoover, the current printer publisher, he was worked for the printer, but he was the publisher. Remember, he assumed the $75 debt. Richard Hoover doubted that a woman could do the job. And Steve Abbott and I sat there with him and stared him down. He finally got him to relent after a poet staged a sit-in at his office and mistakenly sat in at the real estate office next door. The idea for Poetry Flash came from John Ford, a creative writing student at San Francisco State, and Anne Headley, who is British. They got the idea from Time Out, a London publication for theater listings and reviews. They named it Poetry Flash and put in $10 each to publish the first issue in fall 1972. They divided the first print run, ran them all over town, and the Flash was born. Early editors and writers included poet Alan Sadowski, retired director of the MFA program at San Jose State, writer Yana Harris, University of Washington now, Timothy Jacobs, Hal Lutsky, nonfiction author, Joe Flowers, and many others. Hand collating the Flash in the basement of Hoover Printing became overwhelming. 6,500, we couldn't do more than that physically, even with a big stuffing party. When I got pregnant, I knew I had to be clever. With topographer Alistair Johnston's help, we designed Poetry Flash, as you knew it, the newspaper, in April 1983, so a machine could do the folding and stuffing like a real newspaper. Artist Frances Butler did calligraphy for the logo. She said, if I'd known you were going to hang around, I'd done a better job. My daughter was born May 1st, 1983, hours after I mailed the May issue, and she's here. She drove from LA. You might remember the 80s language war, yeah. You might remember the 80s language wars starring Tom Clark and George Lakoff. I wanted to explore both sides of the issue and to allow poets to vent their passions, to dialogue. In doing that, we managed to start a little culture war. And it was the last time I ever let Richard, like, just kidding, edit a piece like that. We had, he was great. But it was, all I can say is that they should have seen what was taken out. We had helped to celebrate deep avant-garde poetry as a new voice on the scene that others should know about. But being among the first, if not the first, to write about experimental and avant-garde poetries, as readers who weren't part of the group, really one of the first, if not the first, we started a shockwave, a rip in the time-space continuum. But we did it, faced it. We all learned together. Now we have hybrid poetries, an evolution, a situation where all of our poetries are influencing all of the poetries. And that was the concept that we were going for in the first place. Mark Baldridge, my late husband, came on board in 1975 and directed our annual Watershed Environmental Poetry Festival. The 29th annual was held in Berkeley Civic Center Park in 2024. We co-founded Watershed when Bob Hass was named the first U.S. Poet Laureate from the West in 1995. The first festival at the band shell at Golden Gate Park was unforgettable. Sound by Bill Graham, complete with helicopters, with Lawrence Ferlinghetti reading Buddha in the Woodpile and Bob Hass reading from the stage, which was parked in front of the band shell, a flatbed semi-truck with a life-sized humpback whale carved from storm-salvaged redwood by a New Zealand sculptor. We called it a bi-species poetry festival. And of course, the Poetry Flash reading series since 1982, and the Northern California Book Awards. 2025 in September was the 44th. And we were lucky enough to be able to honor Brenda Hillman, not this year, but the year before. This year was Rebecca Solnit. Thanks to all of our contributing editors, Lee Rossi, Susan Kelly DeWitt, Stephen Kessler, Carl Landauer, Jack Foley, Kirk Lumpkin and the Ecology Center, Chris Olander, Nevada City Poet Laureate, Nevada County Poet Laureate, all of the poet teachers in our John Oliver Simon Poets in the Schools program, Brennan DeFrisco, Tarita McKell, and more. Let's continue our celebration of community using the skills that we have to express our love and connection. So I'll read a few poems, and I just am so grateful to all of you, and all of you, Lee Rossi and Susan are here, and that you came all this way, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but all of you who've read, so generously and beautifully for our community. And we do, Poetry Flash covers the whole state of California valiantly as best we can. Suzanne Lummis is here. She drove from LA last night. And one of the many things that we did was we published we co-published with Heyday Books. I edited 8 volumes of the California Poetry Series. And Suzanne was one of the books. It was wonderful, In Danger. And Dan Bellman's here. And he was the very first book that was published, One Hand on the Wheel. A magnificent book. So, the evidence for Telegraph Avenue. A woman swung out ahead of me, trailing conch shell, tuberose, clove. I never expect the delicate on this avenue at noon, but there I was, and there she went, an overwrought abundance, like too many ripe zucchini or a sudden house of gold. Here's a poem about, it's about Berkeley. Even though we cover the whole state, and I mean, there's lots of stories connected to that. But taking my daughter to college, when writing about great loss, begin with the movement, not I feel, Grace Paley. I was walking down Telegraph, noticing movement, picking my way through the veil of pierced bodies, the zebra tattoo sign, the music shop display, disheveled robots made from dog food cans and old CDs, unraveled cassettes for hair, followed the flow to the Cafe Med, its shiny aqua mural still reflecting a haunted Greek in Pompeii, observant emigres behind the counter, cafe where I too have been 86th, chased for a wandering latte glass by an exiled man with wild eyes and fiercer temper. Ghost image of the bookstore flower stand as Hassan the florist defended me, shouted him down, the plush dream roses opening. Walking down Telly, my hands became spontaneous language, signs I knew no context for, spoken tongues, sang like birds. There was something inside of me, the cool, cold cylinder of me, sweating out images like toxins. What I never should have seen was now tattooed forever on some part of my psyche, untouched by light. A complex aboriginal message encrypted on the back of my neck. It was a beautiful fall day with wisps of clouds so ethereal they cast no shadows, like a patient etherized on the horizon. How did you put it, Mr. Eliot? Is this why you chose Britain over Missouri? Oh, the fineness of this light, and how much the racing mind can have and may not want. My hands wanted to tell the story, though my spirit had already classified it. My father, my daughter. Now I'm in an airplane, suddenly realize the rusty iron curtain of the landscape below is really the deciduous turning of autumn, not a wave of red algae or red Utah rock blooming in the green horizon's tide. Instead, the spinning discs, these particular New England orangey browns, dip below my convictions, the receding horizon, oblivious as escaped lingerie, unfurling from a pant leg, at first unseen, then pressing where it hurts. So, Piano Man. Gosh, Rooney, I'm so organized about I usually time every comma, but this was so, the way this all happened, and Richard and everything, it just, because it's been a lot, making sure he's okay, and Murray's been to visit him, and others have been to visit him, but I'm trying my best to keep him going. I'd like to read this because The memorial for my old friend Toby Kaplan is today too, in another room here. And Toby passed away recently from ALS. They're having it today because her birthday was November 3rd, and mine is November 4th, Election Day. So it's weird, but anyway. So I'd like to read a poem for a singer-songwriter, a friend of mine who passed away in Detroit, where I grew up, who died also of ALS. Robin's Song. She packed us a soda in the little cooler. She went into the closet to look for it, leaning on her IV pole, hand on hip. The straws were a brilliant addition. He wants to tear out the wall so she can see the garden. She will tell him where to plant from her wheelchair. She was fitted with braces on her hands and feet, but first she turned the portfolio pages, studied the art. I was looking out of the window, and suddenly there was no glass. She moved the flowers from the table. Her little dog Guppy squirming for air. She twirled her lasso, her feeding tube. Spring hadn't hit yet. For her, each season would make one more bow. One last cowgirl adventure to see Old Faithful. On the road, an emergency room, jean jacket she never wore, gnashing paralysis, morphine, an aria sung at Christmas time. She scrawled out quiet thank yous and goodbyes, curled fingers beckoning her subjects, her loved ones. She asked for her hats, for a little extra mojo. Their princess needed her red beret. Her magic wand signed jokey little miracles in pulsing concentric circles. But first she will press the locomotive key, the rhino roar, her computer a deadpan translator, a cappella undertaker. Raging, passive-aggressive understudy, sotto voce, mechanical beast, trapped on a delicate stage. Narrative had become impossible for us, and grammar a tall, cool tower. I'm not rich, so I want to sleep on the futon, he said. Okay, I said, though you make no sense at all. You've lost it too. We tremble and laugh. What do you make of the indigo out the window, I said. Blue darker than night, Jupiter hovering near the moon. All a mystery again, more so now than when we were young and everything new. Now the mystery hangs in the air, like a fog of skunk and gasoline, dancing to a slow country waltz. Pull the green grass over my shoulders, she said. I don't see it, he said, but I hear it, the ancient keening like a big river rushing. The house is still a shroud, yet a robin redbreast sits in the snowy window, shares my coffee. My story is over, she said. My story is over. Pull the green grass over my shoulders. Keep my poem in a carved wooden box. My goodness. Like I said, I'm usually much more fantastically organized, but I think I've done about 20 minutes, maybe close to it anyway, so why don't I just do one more of something and let you go. So, here's a poem that friends here have said they like, so Let's read it. Discovery. Let's take this cool and light. The voice, my voice, but perhaps yours, resonates from a particular place, tremor pool of the brain. That is to say, the body, but also its less physical webs, such as soul arc, aura. The point is midway in a clearing. It is night and the snow is incandescent. To say this is to say a puzzle. The voice is authoritative, but not low, not mundane, and not vibrationally low. The voice is not conscious of its act. It is simple articulation, out of sync tongue, earnestly dubbing the undermine's script. In the dark, the upheld signing hand cannot own its deep perceptions, can swim in its burning, freezing seas, only in sleep. There is no dialogue, only the breeze over rippling tides, nonverbal call and response, self to self without consciousness of self, and so with no lack of poise or balance. Through the glittery night, the determined snowflake glides. Crazy pinball pings softly between the legs of the moon, swirls the silvery orchard, low bell stroke far away, dark tower on the horizon, luminous, luminous, tremulous quake at the red-hot center wherever you are, opening your mouth to speak. True pitch, celestial chime, tuning fork quiver, wild spitfire, nerve to the heart. Thank you so much, and we have lots for you to look at over on the Poetry Flash table. And here's a picture I took of Steve Abbott in 1980.
So let's do it one more time. 15 years. Okay, we're going to go straight through. If you're like me and have restless leg syndrome, you can stand up. But we're going to have a couple of people speak. I think Lucy, you want to just say something?
Okay.
And Lee, you wanted to say something? Is that true? No, you didn't. I'm not putting you on the spot. I mean, except I just did. Is there someone else? No, there was somebody. I must have dreamt it. Lucy, come on up.
Well, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to Joyce and Richard and Poetry Flash. Poetry Flash has been with me every step of the way since I first started writing and publishing poetry. I graduated from UC Berkeley in 1971. I joined the Berkeley Poets Co-op in 1972. And then a couple months later, Charles Entrican, one of the founders of the co-op, brought the very first copy of Poetry Flash and announced that we had this calendar now of poetry events in the Bay Area. We were all thrilled. It was marvelous. And then I gave my very first reading at Cody's in the 1970s. Joyce wasn't yet coordinating it, but she was working at Cody's, so she was there. And at this first reading, I didn't have a book out or anything, and my knees shook like that. and then, when my first book really did come out in 1982, Joyce published a review of it in Poetry Flash and gave a reading at Cody's to me and the other Berkeley Poets Co-op people who had books come out that year. And this is really terrible to admit. I didn't read. I was there in the audience. I just recovered from a horrible illness that made my blood pressure skyrocket, and I was having panic attacks. And I was worried I'd have a panic attack in the middle of a reading. And so I feared that I might never get another chance to read Cody's again. But then when my next book came out in I think it was 1997, Joyce hadn't given up on me and gave me another reading. And at that reading, I made a big discovery, and that was that it's worth it to get my act together to really do a poetry reading for Poetry Flash, just to have Richard Silberg introduce me. So I really owe him a big thanks too. And I think I've read from every one of my subsequent poetry books with Poetry Flash, including my memoir. So thank you, Joyce, for that. And then I trained as a biologist, and in the 1990s, I started writing eco-poetry. Lo and behold, as soon as I started writing eco-poetry, Joyce has started the Watershed Environmental Poetry Festival. So it was not only a place where I could read my work, but I could hear the work of other like-minded poets and connect with them. And so poetry, just ever since I started writing poetry, has always been there, a place where I could submit, a place where my book work could be reviewed, but above all, a place where I could be part of this fabulous literary community. So Joyce, thank you so much for that. I love you.
Well, you can see how much it means to people, to poets, right? Another example. This is from a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, who Bruce Isaacson, who's written for The Flash, and he couldn't, well, I'll just read what he said. He wanted to be here. Prisoner to my own poetry diaspora, with family ill, wishing I could be with Joyce, Richard, and you all to celebrate Poetry Flash. Fitting to celebrate as All Souls Day approaches, for that is what Joyce and Richard do and have done in poetry, to bring an advent of soul, of purpose, of art and feeling, to help us all rise above the indignity of death, disassociation, and derangement that passes too easily for modern order. I've known Richie almost 40 years, learned in his classes at UC, and love him as a friend. Joyce has been the structure framing poetry, a smart, tough editor, always kind, insistent, purposeful. We celebrate Joyce and Richard, their poems, and all the help they've freely given to all the poets of our place and time. All Souls Day indeed. To you, Joyce, to you, Richard. Bruce Isaacson. So we're going to finish off with Marie reading Richard's, a little bit of Richard's story. And if I may just say, I know you're going to say this too, but I'm so very conscious of America Westering. It's what we have done and why we're here. And he's going to read a poem that captures some of the dialectical tension that still exists in the American spirit. Murray Silverstein.
Richard so wanted to be here. I saw him yesterday, and he said, I feel like I'm missing my bar mitzvah. I knew he had a poem, The Godfighter, in which he claimed at the age of, I think, 7 or 8, he had become an atheist. So I said, Richard, do you have a bar mitzvah? And he said, yes, under protest. And I know he was thinking about this reading a lot over the last year. When he asked me to read for him, I said, what would you like me to read? And he said, The Horses. Now, that's the title poem of his new, selected and new book called The Horses. It also was originally published in his book, Doubleness. And I knew it. I have all his books, and I'd read it. And at first I thought it was that poem about the Triple Crown, The Horses, but of course it's a much different poem. And when I read it and went back to see him, I said, Richard, it's 10 pages long. And he said, read The Horses. I'm nervous about trying to channel it for him, but I said, I will try, and I asked him a few questions along the way so I could understand it. And let me try to set it up for you a little bit. There's deep New York family of origin background here. The three characters you have to have in mind are Richard's Uncle Mac, M-A-C, Uncle Mac. That's an uncle on his mother's side, a maternal uncle. Mac's father, Richard's grandfather, is Joseph. And one of Mac's sons, Richard's cousin, is Joe, is named after his grandfather. So that's the three to bear in mind. There's other family that comes up here, but that's the key to this. From Richard's point of view, grandfather Joseph, Uncle Mac, and cousin Joe. The Horses by Richard Silberg. The actual ride was thrilling enough. Generic triumph of it, horseback, through redwood forests, galloping on hills overlooking the sea. Left eyelid scratched by branches, and ischial callosity pounded raw, sore. That's a callus on your butt. An ischial callosity pounded raw, sore, and on the strange insides of my thighs. And when I got home from Camp Meeker, my mother's letter was waiting for me, telling of Mac's death. How he had called the day before to inquire after Pop, said he wasn't feeling so well himself, a bubble he couldn't get rid of. How his girlfriend, Barbara, had entered his apartment after unanswered telephone messages, found him sitting on the toilet in his pajamas. The two events tangled together. Mac rose like some bottom fish in the shining and exultation at first, even his dying. An end, a shape, Uncle Mac, the family schlemiel. Unmistakably dim-witted, his spark of joy, nasal, rumbling. But there was a muddy suck in Mac's death. Narrowness and anger. Months later, visiting my parents in New York, cousin Joey came to dinner. I saw him after 20 years. At the time of the ride and the death, at my mother's stern request, I had written to Mac's sons, Howard and Joey, round phrases to neglected family, bright veins in a darkness. And now here was Joey. Fat, bald, graying, sweet and broken as a hamster. Joey looked like Mac, but slighter, still boyish, something massive in Mac's old man's sloping his head, belly, the nubbing of his knees, and Mac looked like Grandpa Joseph, but thickened, homely, without the arrowed serenity, the slim, dark handsomeness of his father. Collapsing cups, Joseph, Mac, and Joey, Joseph's namesake. I met Joey in the foyer, embraced him. He was very emotional, asked me about myself. I gave him some quick details. I ended by saying, I love my life. Half true. Well, more than half. But I omitted the poverty, the desperation, and Joey seized on my words, overreacted, and enviously, not enviously so much as with hunger. And then he talked about himself. His mother, Mac's beloved Ruth, had died in birthing him, and Joey was brought up by his grandfather, Ruth's father. Mac off selling on the road. His grandfather, Joey said, was the only one who loved him. And when he died, the grandfather, Joey was sent off to school. He was several times in private hospitals for depression, always voluntarily, and then in a disturbed, debt-ridden time, after the breakup of Joey's marriage, Max had committed him to a locked ward, a violent ward, at Manhattan State Public Hospital. After that experience and the legal struggle to free himself, Mac, Joey said, became a terror to him. Long separation, and when he saw his father again, even after many years, it was with a certain uncontrolled trembling. Revelation. Like the turning of a gem, I had never thought of Mac as a terror to anybody. Dark Mac, the Punisher. And oddly, as Mac changed in my mind, my memory of the horseback ride changed too. I remembered the brute, intractable head of Dusty, my slow, safe mare, pale, yellowish eyes like marbles, how big she was, brown and gray, the round, sleek hoarseness of her. How hard to set her in motion, stubborn and heavy-limbed. My friends had warned me to be firm. She might rebel, act up, to be careful currying her, never to get myself in position to be kicked on or stepped on. So there was a verge, of course, but, excuse me. Lost the page. So there was a verge of menace in Dusty. Her size, her animal silence. I remembered moments galloping when my feet had slipped deep in the stirrups and I felt myself pushed forward, off balance, too high on her withers. No real fear, but something in me had entertained falling, almost acquiesced. Even the landscape, when we broke from the flickering of the forest, those raw golden hills, shaggy, sun-drenched, the sea several miles below, covered with low clouds, even the landscape seemed remote in the glare, alien. The memory ride became a journey into a void. The animals, the earth, a disposition, some enormous longing, transcending on my bumpy butt, the horses, the engines, and as if I could leap up and grab something, hold on, just by wanting it and naming it. But what? And what did that Northern California paradise have to do with Mac? His sorrow, his narrow-skied East Coast grit and sorrow. Not that Mac had been sad, he had a gift for pleasure, but his life surely had been hard. He had lost Ruth, his first love, delicate, tubercular, in childbirth. His second wife, Bert, Howard's mother, had died of cancer, and yet a third wife, Edith, that tiny-minded Yenta. But he had cared for her. had died a few years before in the aftermath of bypass surgery. It oppressed me. Mac, I realized, had always oppressed me. Since my childhood, the way his eyes would twinkle, bantering to cross swords with my brightness, to draw me into an airless, muddy-minded debate about religion or school pride, the tastelessness of the dry kosher meat, provincialism of his life in Patterson with Bert and Howard, all Mac's years on the road selling Niagara vibrators, and later, when he grew older, out of a store in Hoboken. The blinkered tenacity of it, sloping, sagging knuckliness of it. Christ. It was like being drowned, doubled, and gasping through some dark vein of kitsch in urban rock. Irksome harness. As when a child, I was pulled from my Sultan's play to visit the family, these common, boring people, linked to me only by birth, by blood. Mac was sucking the ride down to schlemieldom. How ridiculous. My leap out of poverty, hunger for the animal, the elemental. Mac superposed upon everything as if I roiled in his sullenness, his resentment, trodden ranges of his sloping belly, nubbled knees, of his liver and guts. And at the center, straight, flame-like, stood Grandpa Joseph, who had died young when my mother was 4 and when Mac was 8 or 9, who had left behind an aura of gentility, of poetry. Joseph, leader of the Romanian immigrant community, arbiter, the beacon. But I had heard Mac grumble about his father when my mother invited him to dinner a few years before. He, Mac, had seemed obscurely on trial, as if my mother were a witness and I some kind of judge. He couldn't even make a living, he said fixedly. He was a conductor on the trolley. He tried to sell insurance. You remember, Helene? Of course, my mother remembered almost nothing of that time and made the nurturing excuse that Joseph had already been sick. But after Mac left, she told me again about his resentment of his father, how Mac had always felt slighted because he was the slow one. Joseph thought him stupid. How even when they walked on the street, Joseph spotless, beautifully dressed, Mac had always dwelt, she said, his mother, upon the beauty of his father's clothes. Joseph walked ahead, always a pace or two ahead, as if he were ashamed of Mac, as if he were saying before the eyes of the community, as if he were trying before the eyes of the community to disown him. Listening to my mother, I had a sudden comprehension of Mac's doubt. That first crumbling that drove him, the courses that he took, when his children were growing, all that doggish activity. Of course, Mac was naturally vital, doggish, but the Jewish histories classes, the psychology, the literature, the samba lessons, the tennis lessons, as if he were proving himself, his style, his worth, as if he were running from the back of his own head. Then Joey swam back to me, forlorn boy in the gray, paunchy man. Still sensitive, slender inside, the boy who had never known his mother, who bore the unspoken blame for her death. He was trying so hard to stay out of the hospital, to become human, talking in jokes, in hip wise guy desperation, his son, his daughter, staying off drugs, therapy groups, Weight Watchers groups, and Mac, his father, who had spent his life trying to catch up to his own father, to pull even, thick twinkling in the pastures of manly respect. I saw a fiery ring of fathers and sons, wrongs, resentments, thwarted love, and beyond, barely sensed the molten sea of souls, terrible depth, resonance, and suddenly I felt myself a limb of my family. No matter how I stretched and leaped, anxious green twig twisting out to the Pacific. I pulled the pictures Mac had snapped out of the envelopes my mother had sent them in for you to remember us. True to his Macness, he had beheaded me and my father. In 2 of the 3 pictures, at the forehead, at the neck. But in the good one, there we are. The 3 of us, my mother between, our arms around her, standing against the living room drapes. We all look a little older than our mental images my mother had written. Her lips are pursed for the camera in her sexy rumba music pose. I love that. My father, in his old man's semi-crouch, suavely, dutifully smiling. Ironically, the snapshots became my remembrance of Mac. That visit was the last time I saw him alive. The bantering gone, becoming beaming and courteous and oddly humble, like a peasant bowing down to a prince, as if he knew Mac. Mac was making his arrangements. The brittle rapprochement with Joey, and incredibly, his bar mitzvah that he studied for, gave to himself at the age of 76. Looking at Mac's photos, I feel everything dissolving. My mother and father wrinkling, melting, my own flesh sinking on my bones. It's like swinging into a gallop. The way the horse seems to falter, to fall down to its gait, and then you're galloping, fleet, as if burning in time. Heavenly horses, nothing to hold to, no way to rein in. And this is where the poem pulls apart. The dream ride. It wants to be a ceremony, a prayer. It wants to realize that tree of blood and family, one trunk with branches stretching across a continent, to give a dead man who wouldn't have wanted it, who would have preferred Fisherman's Wharf or Disneyland, the tawny power of the hills, the horses of that great sighing space that really isn't mine to give anyway. City man, Garrett Poor poet. Release is what the poem wants. Release is what the poem wants. To unite Mac with the horses, to make Joey love himself, to free me, myself, from my own anxious cycling. And how, of course, can these words do that? I did go riding again, though, in the spring. The deep forested gullies were lush. The restless waving grasses of the hills were greener. I had a different horse too, Apache, a small spirited gelding who wanted to lead, to run. We didn't see the Pacific this time. The day was warm and hazy. Or the Russian River in its tight green valley, nosing to the sea. But from time to time, I thought of Mac and of Joey when I wasn't thinking of controlling Apache or how the saddle was pounding my butt again and again on the same sore spot. And I imagined that I was riding kiddish for him. For Uncle Mac, I was riding cottage. For Uncle Mac, that I was riding for what was missed.
Okay, now that we have been remarried, there's a cake over there. So you can have some cake. There's something to sign if you'd like to put your name to something we're going to give Joyce and Richard. It's back on that back table. If you want a little heart crane, find a little slip of paper. But mostly talk to each other. Keep this strong. Thank you.